Alrighty, welcome to another edition of Magus Talk. We're continuing our interpretation of Jay's dreams. Jay is dealing with serious personal issues, and part of this is brought up because of the fusion alchemy work he is doing, as well as the rest of the jinn work. So, without further ado, let me hand the mic to Jay. So, okay, Jay, what's the next dream?
And so then I have some more dreams. I have a dream of where me and my father were basically trading punches, except I got to go first, and I was supposed to hit him like 5 times in the face. And but I stopped at around 4 because he was just getting too beat up, and I was just feeling bad. And then some vampires were people who used to be vampires. I think these things are settled now, except for possibly my mom, but it's kind of difficult to deal with because my mom is not all that cognitive. We're just kind of like, okay, let's just take care of her, you know. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to trouble the lady, you know. It's just like it's like the past is the past, and I'm just trying to handle my issues right now with myself. My brother used to be a big vampire in my life, like my father. And so anyway, in the dream, both my mother and my brother were angry at me and Dad for some reason. I guess because we were hitting each other? I don't know. And then I had another dream, very close to that dream, about my dad waking me up. And it's, he wakes me up, and I'm in my old room that I had when I was in college, which it's separate from the house, but it was below my brother's room. I hated that place. Kind of a dark time in my life. Shortly thereafter, I just left the country and went to Japan, which drove everybody insane. Lived there off and on for like 10 years. Anyway, so in that room, my dad wakes me up and he wants me to go outside and help him do whatever he wanted to do. My dad always had like some kind of project going on, but it was like, look, you know, I only have an hour left to sleep and I have to wake up and teach. And I'm like, no, get out of here. I got to work. What are you doing? And then my dad's upset, but then I get out. And if everybody knows that, some of you don't, that I teach in, I live inside my truck right now, and I teach inside of it, and that's where I make money. And so anyway, Dad took the truck and parked it somewhere else because it was in the way, and I had trouble finding it. So at this point, I tell Dad, it's like, look, and this is how Dad used to talk to me. This is money. You can't get in the way of this. If you get in the way of this, my life goes. It's done. My lifestyle is over. We can't do this, you know. And my dad starts crying, and then I start crying. And then I try to tell my father, look, you are the one that bought the truck. It wasn't his name. And he did buy it, but trust me, I worked it off. And you know, now it's in my name. But again, it was when he bought the truck, it was a cool gesture of freedom from him, which I don't know if I ever really talked to Ari about that, but there was a thing. And so when I built that sailboat, or at least most of it, maybe that was my gesture of freedom back to him. I don't know. But those two things I feel good about. But anyway, we were crying a whole lot. Now this brings me to the genies. The better I get at organ fusion and organ cleansing, the more the emotions come up. Now I know I can be a dramatic guy, but this is not me being drama queen. This is like, I can feel the energy come up. Sometimes the energy can be like a genie wanting to talk to me, and I'm like, boom, I can do that. We can talk. Other times that energy comes up, and there's no genie there. It's just me being very angry some of the time, and most of the time just crying. And this happens during organ fusion practice. This happens during dreams. This happens sometimes when I don't want it to. Uh, Pull over and put the emergency lights on and like flip out for a little bit. That didn't happen yet. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully I can keep a cap on it until at least I'm physically safe to address this kind of stuff.
Okay, before you move to the next dream, Jay, let me just recap for this. Like I said, these dreams that you're having are essentially their context. Your subconscious is coming out and providing context for the previous dreams. That the issues that you're purging and healing in a sense with the emotional release, you're releasing these energies that have been compressed, and all of the other vampire dreams or whatever is attacking you, so to speak, like we said in the last podcast. These are being it's almost like the the issues that are trying to come out are being inhibited because it's in the best interest of something not to clear out. Because when you clear out, your psychic immune system can naturally come online and protect you from these infiltrations. Now, these things have been going on forever. They're still going on at deep levels. So you're becoming more sensitive to these kind of invasions. Now, what these dreams are indicating is your relationship with your father, which is a kind of, the hitting each other, the punching each other, and all of that is kind of playful. All of the conflicts you've had with him were basically not serious. They may have seemed serious, but and me he may have gotten hurt from them, but it was almost like his way of, okay, whatever's been going on between us, compared to the more serious stuff that's going on with that was going on with your mother and your brother, is really nothing. So, and at the same time, your father at this point almost reverses roles where he's like the child. He's like the immature one, wanting to play around, messing with your truck. And you were the one with the seriousness about, well, this is how I make my money, so don't do this. It's something, it's almost like at this stage of the game, you completely understand where he's coming from, at least on the subconscious level, and that's where it matters. Intellectually, I don't know, but subconsciously, deep down, there's nothing negative about the whole thing. This is just the stuff being worked out. That was the level of communication that was going on. At one point, you were the one holding the youthful vitality and the need for freedom. He was the one that was more restrictive because of responsibilities. And now you're almost seeing his side of the coin. And he, wherever he is, however the situation is seeing your side of the coin. But with your mother and brother, it's almost different. They resent that kind of closeness, that kind of repartee. It's almost like your brother takes your mother's side, and that often happens in families, and you take your father's side. Now, you had another dream where that had to do with your mother again, that was in some kind of Hogwarts that was all females, and somehow you were in it, and I don't remember, and your father was there, and they screwed him over somehow. He had an accident with a car in the dream. And this has to do with the feminine archetypes, the masculine archetypes, gender polarization, and all these kinds of things. Some and in any case, it's almost like your subconscious is saying, okay, there's one category here of relationship with my father. This isn't even an issue. But then there's another category of relationship with my mother and my brother, which has been resolved, as you say, but it is an issue, or it was an issue. What you're expelling essentially is the more serious stuff. So that is the dream meaning in a nutshell. It kind of encompasses that. You're giving yourself a kind of context for what you are purging, what you are cleansing yourself, and what you are healing. Now, the previous vampire dream was overlaid on top of that. This is trying to work that out, but at the same time, presenting a context of what inhibits you from dealing with it. So let's see what further these more detailed dreams that you have now, after this commentary, of course, and what they have to say. So take it away again, Jay.
But anyway, on to the next dream. There were lions in this dream, and these lions were in a car. And the car was attached to this big pole propped up into the air. And there was a very haphazardly constructed bridge, but it wasn't too bad, connected to the car and a pole. And the car and the pole had also a little area for only the lions to walk outside, but it wasn't a whole lot. But lions were like cats in this video, and they were really cool. Almost, they were cartoonish, kind of, when I looked at them in part of the dream, but not like a goofy cartoon, like a cool cartoon. And then they were actual lions also in the dream that didn't look so, they looked real. And these are female lions. There were no male lions there. And so I obviously go into the car because lions are cool and I'm the Beastmaster. And so I sleep with these lions. And while I was making the recording at night, I'm like, I say something like, and so I go into this car and I want to sleep with the lions. I don't want to have sex with the lions. I just want to sleep with the lions. And I thought that was kind of funny during the soundbite. I was just kind of making a joke to myself. But then, then when I heard it again, I'm like going, And so and shortly thereafter in the dream, I came up to a girlfriend, not one that I know, just a dream girlfriend. Beautiful girl, but she was angry, as if I was betrayed her by sleeping with the lions. And I'm like, okay, I need to break up. Now, and when I said that to my brother. Now, my brother is, of course, the relationship is so much smoother now. However, he, and sometimes represents in my dreams a vampire. So is it my brother or is it a vampire? And it's only because my subconscious has labeled the guy a certain way, but that's not the case. So anyway, there we go with that dream.
Okay, Jay's second dream. This reveals the situation at greater depth. You see, the lions are feminine representations. So the subconscious is telling Jay, look, your relationship with your mother is not a relationship against the feminine. It's not a problem there. The primordial feminine, the animalistic feminine, the real spirit of the gender, so to speak, is something really cool, and it helps you through life. You are positive with it. You have the car, and the lions are on the car, which means that they are part of your vehicle in life. The spirit of the feminine is actually blessing you, so to speak. And it indicates a grounded personality as well. It's not alienated in that sense. What happens is that there's a discrepancy between the primordial feminine and the socially conditioned feminine. The human women under social circumstances that have their issues and stuff. So these are not women issues per se. They are issues of social conditioning that get in the way of, a harmonized relationship and the relationship with the mother figure. So I say this because sometimes when there are conflicts with the mother figure, it creates confusion as if there's a problem with the internal feminine, the anima, as Carl Jung would call it. Also, relationship with the feminine in general. However, Jay has protective spirits and essences that are of a feminine nature as well. And you have the the feline representation there. Only here, we don't have a feline domestic cat, we have the wild lions. And that's more serious and far deeper because the lions are the king of beasts, and essentially we have something far more primordial. At the same time, The situation is that the lions were partly cartoonish, but cool cartoonish. They were also real. So the subconscious is telling Jay that whether it's a spirit form, a cartoon, for example, non corporeal, or whether it's real life, IRL, so to speak, the relationship is harmonized and the feminine spirit, the spirit behind women, healthy women, so to speak, the unconditioned natural feminine is on your side. And the part of you, the anima, is the part that helps you get through life. So it's indicating to Jay, and Jay is computing, so to speak, with his subconscious as he moves through these deep issues that, yeah, I'm not messed up as I thought. This whole situation is not because I'm screwed up with the feminine archetype in any shape or form. There's something else going on. And the human woman that came in and was angry because he was sleeping with the lion indicates something else. Some men and some women are so gender polarized that members of the opposite sex that are harmonized with their alternate polarity, so to speak, where men have the anima, the internalized feminine, and women have the animus, or the internalized masculine. So often you will have people, females, women, human women, who are uncomfortable with men in harmony with their internal feminine. And at the same time, you have men who are uncomfortable with women, even though they actually desire those women more. And maybe the women desire those kinds of men who are in harmony with their internal masculine, but there's a power play involved. And that's not on the side of the individual who is in harmony with their opposite polarity, so to speak. It is a problem with the individual who feels threatened because they are not in harmony with their opposite polarity. Issues against the opposite gender, blaming the opposite gender for everything, and essentially manipulating anybody who wants to have that kind of harmony or anybody in general. There's a lot of people that favor members of the opposite sex who are hyperpolarized toward that gender almost in a stereotypical manner. Or there are members of any gender that, like I said, feel threatened by anybody who is more balanced. So in this case, the human woman was outraged because it's almost like you have no right. It's almost like how some people say, "Well, you're not this gender or this race, so you can't even talk about what that race or gender is or does have any opinion about it." And just me, who is externally that gender or race, can have an opinion about it. And that's a kind of psychological manipulation in terms of monopolizing something that doesn't belong to anybody. External appearance is secondary in these deeper issues. At the same time, yeah, you can't mansplaining and womansplaining. These things are a thing. People come off and they manipulate other people using that kind of argument for one way or the other. So those are like two sides of the same coin. The whole mansplaining thing is the opposite side of the coin of somebody assuming women have no opinion or shouldn't even uh, have any opinion on, and they're not qualified regarding male issues, or reciprocally, a woman who tells men like it is. You got men pissed off telling them to shut up, because you're a woman and you don't know what men are going through, and this, that, and the other. Well, at the same time, the opposite side of the coin is, uh, somebody who just is opinionated and says, well, my internal feminine tells me, or whatever. So this is a point of view where socialization is often confused with a natural polarity archetype, or psychic or psychological construct, so to speak, psychological energy or presence. And Jay is stating in this sense that no, I'm balanced. I know where the real feminine is. It's the primordial. The animal kingdom defines it. We have our genders biologically, and so it is far closer to look at the king of beasts, the lion, instead of a domesticated feline, for example, as a representation. And he wanted to sleep with them, meaning he wanted to rest and relax, but also his subconscious would come out, which comes out in dreams, to be open to that. And the subconscious is telling them, no, you're open to that. You're comfortable with it. But there's women out there who are not comfortable with it. In fact, you will probably encounter many women to which you're attracted to, and probably this occurred. I mean, Jay, if you look at the women in your life, if you look at the women in your life, if you look at the mother-in-laws in your life and stuff like that, uh, you might find that they are the types, and stemming with your mother's thing, that are resentful of men who are comfortable with the masculine, but also comfortable with the feminine for real, because their internal feminine is on uh, in a healthy relationship with the rest of their psyche. So you're basically affirming yourself. Like I said, these dreams so far have put the situation into context. So let's see what the next dream says. Okay, Jay, continue, please.
Moving forward. I was crying. Okay, so this is the cool part. Um, Ari has mentioned the genies upgrading us, and he's like, it sounds kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not defensive, but he's like just trying to paint a picture or a backdrop of, look, man, it's not like, ooh, let's talk to this genie. What does this genie have to say? Ooh, let's talk to this genie. What does this genie have to say? This is part of the adventure, but it's just part of it. The other parts of the adventure is, okay, here's one part of the adventure. All of a sudden, after years of summoning genies, bang! I can talk to dead people now. And it's like, the first person, was it the first person I talked to? Yeah, okay, my father was the first person I talked to after he died. But then there was a cousin who passed away that I talked to, and then my uncle as well, and now I can pick up objects that the people in my family have passed away, and I can, communicate with them. This is a really cool talent. Not that I really have all that much use for it. But hey, man, it's nice to see another part of the universe, you know. But anyway, this next dream gets kind of necromantic, as in necromancy. So, as a hobby, because of my newfound talent, that dates back to like 2019, 2018, somewhere when my father passed away. But anyway, because of that talent, I've now picked up an old kung fu book that an old kung fu teacher that Ari knows and is aware of gave me, and he said the style is dead. No one knows the style anymore, but here's some pictures, okay? See if you can figure it out. Now, the way kung fu works is, it's like something gets into your body and teaches you how to move. Are these things human? To the Chinese, they were. To me, not so much. They're more genie-like. But, hey, man, if I can make a connection with this dead guy, then maybe I can, learn some of his style. And it's Xingyi, or, there's three internal arts, the big ones, Tai Chi, Bagua, and Xingyi. And Xingyi is something I already have natural talent at. I got natural talent at all three of them. But, hey, it'd be cool to have a form, okay? So, that's my hobby for a couple of years now. But it's a hobby. I don't take it seriously. I'm not working too hard at it either. I just carry the book with me everywhere. That's all I do. Now,
All right, let me interject here because this is a kind of cool situation. Because, like I had said to Jay, the genies upgrade us, meaning you can do inner work and do all of these methods and techniques and stuff. And then you can also summon spirits that will work on you And this isn't an invasive thing. It's essentially you have your conscious mind working through this and whatever you do, body work and meditation and all of that. And then you have, through the subconscious, you have these influences that actually embed the same kind of training almost automatically. And it's not done in such a way that it's artificial or possessing or anything like that. It complements the conscious work you do. Usually, you have to do some conscious work, and for Jay, for example, or at least have an interest. It'll boost the conscious work and turn it into a talent. Like Jay said, he has a talent for this. And in my case, for example, I could go to a museum and I have a certain psychometric talent where I went to the British Museum 15 years ago and I could touch like a part of the Sphinx that they have over there. And it transports me directly into ancient Egypt. And it's not so much I'm a visual and talking to people and all that. Sometimes that happens, but it's mainly a sense of it, how it felt and how the people were and what was behind this artifact. And I could do that with ancient Greek statues as long as I could put my hand on it. And you're allowed to do that in some of these exhibits. Then I would get an impression. And it would be a natural one. It was almost like, being in modern day, getting some kind of input from somebody. And this is an understanding of the situation. And probably because I have an interest in all of these kinds of things, ancient cultures and stuff. So you do get upgrades where you are predisposed fairly easily. Some people can be more telepathic. Some people can be intuitive. Some people can have the gift of prophecy. These things come into, you might say, because of an energetic conditioning due to the interactions with these formations. So I I believe we're dealing with the underworld. And in ancient Greek, the underworld is called Hades, and the ruler of the underworld is also called Hades. Now, Hades means the unseen, the invisible. So when you deal with the genies, sometimes it says this genie bestows invisibility. Well, if you look at the Latin, invisible also means uh, being spiritual, being sensitive to the unseen. It's not just you not being seen, is you be able to relate to what is not seen. Invisibility, pertaining to the invisible. And that's how I tend to interpret it. And experience has kind of shown me that it's a more correct way, although you not being seen is the other half of the coin. It's just that so many genies bestow invisibility, and but they have different vibrations and different qualities. So what? Different kinds of invisibility? No, but you do have different types of connections to the unseen. Now, the underworld is the land of the dead, so to speak, because the energetic state contains patterns that used to belong to the living, but without a body, these patterns go somewhere. It also contains entities or sentient beings or patterns, maybe that are sentient energies that are not inherently human. Or maybe they were inherently human once. You see, there are no clear cut lines. Everything kind of meshes together. So you can have the spirit of an ancestor who is also part genie. And the traditions do kind of validate that. It's not all about personas, and you're not talking about the soul of the dead person. You're talking about an energy that used to belong to a living person that holds mental formations in it. So your knowledge, sometimes I had realized long ago, several decades ago, that if there's somebody like a major figure and that person is living and is inspirational, yeah, I can get a sense of them. But if they are deceased, somehow it's almost like their talents are available to everybody else. Whoever can tune into that level of perception tunes into the talents of that person and can partake of them. Now, you're not taking the talents, it's not something that's quantified, you're resonating with them. That's the best metaphor I can think of. You're actually coming into a kind of resonating, a similar frequency. Because you're exposed to that frequency, you can imitate it, you can copy it. And so you make it your own. And the original frequency is unaffected. And thus you can get a book, and that's partly how I read stuff too. There are books by mystics, and sometimes I have those experiences, and others have too. You have a mystic, an Indian mystic, for example, and some people, when they read their book, they actually have visions of the person. I had a friend who one day the book just, Ramana Maharshi's book, a book about that guy, fell off the shelf and fell into his lap, as he was crossing through the library, wondering what he was going to do next with his life. And then a couple of days later, he was still wondering, even after he read the book, a knock on his door. He opened his door to his house. Nobody was there. It was like nighttime, and this wasn't a dream. The guy was standing in front of the door, plain as day. And then he disappeared. It was like a very vivid vision that was hyper realistic. And they say, well, it's the soul of the person. Yeah, that emanation infuses everything the mystic does. And talented people are like that too. Anybody who creates, you can have an artist who has a similar type of effect. Somebody goes to an art museum. Now, I am not artistically inclined. I'm kind of musically inclined myself. I play the piano and did some composing on my own, just for the whatever, just like Jay does with the martial arts. But I can tune into a certain musician and get a sense of them. I don't apply it so much, but it's there. So these abilities are there, and they're not that hard to cultivate as long as we focus on such things. It's just that at least the connection to the underworld, and one thing, spirituality avoids connecting us to the underworld because the underworld is more immediate. It's not the domain of hell. The ancient Greeks again perceived the underworld as lying in the west where the sun sets. So the sun sets, that's a symbol of your awareness crossing the horizon to where it isn't seen before. But the real hell is like the midnight point, like directly below into the bowels of the earth is Tartarus. And Tartarus was considered a desolate area that was full of suffering. And evil souls would go and be punished there and stuff like that. So the underworld is really the subtle world, the unseen world, and it's not below in the earth necessarily. It's right there with us, only in a kind of more subconscious frequency, you might say. But if you go into the depths of the earth and the energetic dynamics there, there's deeper level patterns. So the depths of the underworld are where you have things that are so unconscious that nothing is resolved. It kind of sinks down, so to speak. In any case, this is a very good reason why, I do gin work and Jay does gin work and Tara does gin work, is because, the way I express it is like like Jay says, you don't just go talk to them, ask for answers, or tell them to do things for you. They convey a psychic opening that eventually massages your perception in order to become into relationship with this level of interaction. And there is wisdom there because you have the wisdom of all the human beings that have gone before. You have the wisdom of the nature spirits. You can communicate with things far beyond what the jinn are. But the jinn have a certain energetic dynamic that is not angelic. It's less conscious than that, but it's as conscious as we are, you might say. It's just that it's not subject to the constraints of time and space. You can have 20 people, 100,000 people summoning the same genie at the same time, and they'll all have independent experiences. It doesn't mean that the genie takes care of all of them or is omniscient. It means that the jinn itself is a kind of hub of intelligence, and it has legions, and these legions are essentially extensions of itself that contact awareness that comes into proximity. Human awareness resonates, and when it actually partakes of that pattern, then it familiarizes itself with the jinn's intelligence, which means that the extension breaks off as an independent thing. It's like cutting a branch off a tree and grafting it onto another tree. Only this other tree is yourself. So you can graft it on yourself and it becomes a familiar. The familiar is not automatically, oh, that's me, because its pattern is independent, or was. But it's symbiotic with you. So you can have multiple relationships with jinn that are symbiotic organisms, and it's completely healthy and completely benign, provided you do not connect with a jinn when it's corrupted by collective patterns, or patterns that are basically destructive or unhealthy. The jinn themselves need to somehow be purified, or you have to learn to purify things. Part of this training that we're dealing with subconscious issues isn't just therapy. It's also to be able to purify toxic vibrations, toxic energies. So at the body level, because this is a denser energy field, this is shamans connected with this, and this isn't a field of higher consciousness, such as angelic awareness or higher selves, or devas, cosmic entities, cosmic patterns, and stuff like that, or even divinity. This is a level that's akin to having relationships with other people, with animals, with plants, with nature. So the jinn are a part of terrestrial nature. They are a part that you might call is plasmic in origin, where it's a plasmic field, where it's like almost electromagnetic, if you want to use a physical metaphor. But there's a lot of controversy around that, so I won't get into it. In any case, this is the basis of Jay's, and I thought I would interject because it's something that is foundational. Sometimes when I interpret these dreams, and Jay goes on about his own personal matters, it seems like we're doing some form of psychoanalysis when this isn't the case. In fact, my own interpretations come from uh, this cavorting with these jinn-like beings, origin like patterns or energies or sentiences. The It's okay not to define these things rigidly, because when we define them too rigidly, it gets ridiculous. You get too literal. And mythologies are meant to be allegorical. They're meant to give us the essence of the situation, but modern mindsets go and psychologize that. Oh, this is your own subconscious and it's just you. Well, Jay, I'll disagree with you. It's not just you. It is you, but there's more. And it also includes many levels of you where you blend into other things, because our boundaries at the energetic level, with the environment, with the world, with the unseen levels of the world especially, they're beyond blurred. It just blends from one to another. You don't have a clear cut transition. If you have a center that's coherent, however, an awakened soul and a healthy personality, integrity, then you don't, those boundaries aren't threatening. Your center of gravity, so to speak, is solid, and you won't get possessed. And that's what we're working on, to keep that possession from happening. And his dream has indications of that kind of process. So let's get to it and see what's going on here.
So after, what the hell's going on? Okay, so I have this dream of crying a lot, and it's because of Dad, and my tears are filling up a well. Now, and they're just filling up a well, and I'm looking down into the well. And this is like in some kind of facility of some kind, some kind of like maybe a local, like, the elaborate YMCA or something like that. I don't, it's the only thing I can think of. And anyway, there was this teacher there of children. I don't know what he was teaching, and he looked weak and frail, and he started laughing at me because I was crying. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go kick your ass. And so, just like most of my dreams, I don't care how weak they look, they always beat me, mercilessly beat me. And the guy had kind of a Chinese look to him.
In this dream, your subconscious, or jinn intelligence, maybe, because at this point it seems that the jinn are coming and becoming more clear, because it's not just your subconscious here. I don't sense that it's just your personal subconscious analyzing things. In fact, the jinn appear to be in the background all along. And in this case, that's why the frog symbolism. It's not Baal per se, but it's the water element. The water element has to do with your deep biological connection to these emotional issues. And that's where things are subconscious, of course. So you're cleansing at a deep level, at a deep energetic level, not just your chi, so we say your breath energy, but your yin, uh, my pronunciation. But, anyways, the watery energy that has to do with sexual energy, that has to do with your life force at a biological level, at a denser level. It's partly the earth energy itself. So it's a far more dense, grounded, and quasi material energetic pattern dynamic. So this teacher of children was almost like, yeah, man, you're at the beginning stage here. You're dramatizing and you're dramatizing, but let's just give you the gist of what's going on. So finally, after all of these dreams, and I'm not talking about the vampire ones, that's a whole other story. These dreams of trying to cleanse yourself and getting at the heart of the issue, the teacher comes and basically trivializes it because it needs to be trivialized a little bit. You can't take yourself too seriously in these matters, even though they appear to be quote unquote serious. So the teacher is because you're crying a well, you're like emoting, and it's almost like, yes, these are emotions, but you've actually emoted quite a bit here. So you're emoting and emoting, but let's put things into perspective. It's not trying to stop your emotional expression. It's essentially, even the frog image is like, well, this is where you're at, so you're obviously going to be watery, so to speak. What it's doing is trying to give you an alternate perspective because you're running around not in circles, but you've gone through the gamut of psychology and personal analysis and trying to make sense of these things. So the teacher now interjects because the YMCA, or this facility, is a training facility of sorts, but it's for common people, children. It's like, hey, man, this is par for the course. Don't worry about it. The humor of the teacher isn't a humiliating humor, but he's trying to put things into perspective. And you mentioned the book of Kung Fu. And so this teacher, whether it's a jinn or a human or whatever, which is probably more a jinn, is telling you, look, we're upgrading you. And what you're doing now isn't advanced work, it's basic. It's very basic. And that's why you link it to psychology, because it can almost be familiar. Even the listeners are like, yeah, these interpretations, you're psychoanalyzing. Well, yeah, but psychoanalysis then moves into this other zone of, I wouldn't call it necromancy per se, but cavorting with the unseen, underworld perception, true esoteric opening and congress. So this teacher is coming forward and giving you, say, okay, come at me. And he kicks your ass, even though the teacher seems frail and unimportant, or doesn't seem. It's like looks can be deceiving, dude. Your drama can seem very important, but in the scheme of things, is just par for the course. You're cleansing. It's like going to the bathroom. You know, you're not a vampire doing it on somebody else, but you're eliminating your toxins. It's like sweating. You're eliminating. So it's an organic process, and we don't worry about organic processes so much. We let them happen. We don't inhibit them, and it'll be okay. So he's actually, in a roundabout way, giving you some encouragement, as these kinds of teachers do sometimes. Maybe they'll whack you upside the head, but it's also a form of encouragement because it kind of shocks you. It puts things into perspective. But let's get into the dream proper. And well, let's get into the important part of the dream, which is the visions you had, because that's where the genies really step in. Because at that point, you're not subconscious anymore. This is your conscious mind interfacing, probably through some brainwave zone like the theta level, where you're low enough to access this subconscious dynamic, but at the same time awake enough to be able to discern and have some kind of judgment about it, some kind of evaluating capacity. So let's see what these visions tell you, and we'll get to that. All right. Please continue. Sorry for the interruption.
And then, so anyway, I wake up, but I wake up to a whole bunch of visions of a Chinese, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a Chinese motif or whatever. Now, remember, most of my history is in Japan. I've never been to China. I have been to Hong Kong, but that's the closest I've got. So anyway, I'm looking at all of these. It's just this beautiful backdrop. It looks kind of like an office, but also like a throne room. The details are impossible to describe, but just elaborate and Chinesey, if that's a word. And then the person sitting in the middle, there was only one, kept changing. And I did also see a frog. But was this Ball or, it didn't feel like him, so, I don't think so. But it could be. But it was just, it switched back and forth between animals. But the frog did keep coming up. I recognized the frog. This could have something to do with a book that I read a long time ago called The Wandering Taoist. But there was this one quick chapter of a immortal who was also like a frog or something. Maybe it's irrelevant. But anyway, I start talking to the visions, and I rarely do that. And I'm not talking out loud, I'm just talking in my own head. But it's like, hey, you guys don't know what I'm doing. I want to learn Kung Fu. I want to learn this style, and I want to blah, blah, blah. And so I get this last dream.
Before you go on with the dream, let me just interject just a little bit. So, this is what I've been saying. You enter the zone where your conscious mind is now participating, and you're seeing the whole area like with a throne room. And in the throne room, there are people. I mean, it's essentially the jinn himself. The jinn sits on the throne, or the teacher, or the central figure. And the animals that you're seeing back and forth are the representations of the energies involved. Now, these can be energies of the jinn or your own, or both, or I would say and both, because you're being given almost like a situation where, okay, forget about the previous stuff. You've gone through that. Now the real teaching begins. So the next dream is going to tell you the gist of what's really going on. And yeah, the wandering Taoist, who is also a frog, all of these have to do with the watery, denser biological energies that you're cultivating right now or cleansing. Because remember, it's almost like the cats in the earlier dreams when you were dealing with Baal, and you still have to deal with Baal, but at least in those preliminaries, where your fire element, the cats, your consciousness was okay, and but the frogs were messed up, or one of them was okay, the other one wasn't. But over here, the way this is going on is that you got to focus on the biological stuff and purify it, the denser energies. I wouldn't call it biological stuff. So you're being given a teaching here. You're being given instructions, you might say. That's the gist of it. You can set the other stuff aside, but that's rounding it all out. You're in a place, a mythological place of teaching. And since you have this sense of, well, the Kung Fu manual connects me to the underworld and the hidden teaching and all of this, the jinn are communicating, and even perhaps a source of wisdom from Chinese culture itself is communicating something, because you are using fusion alchemy as a Taoist methodology. So let's see what your dream proper has to say. So apparently, as you were moving through this in the state of half sleep, you then fell back asleep, and then it continued with the dream, which involves the comedian Chris Farley. And let me just say that, yes, I do believe this is a projection of yourself, but it's almost like somebody narrating what's going on with you from a different point of view. So it's almost like, okay, Chris, come out. We're going to do a little skit and to to show Jay what he's doing. So Chris Farley in the dream is playing Jay. Jay is not playing Chris Farley. So because Chris Farley is an archetype here, and perhaps and he did have a movie where he was playing some kind of ninja. It's a funny movie. I liked it. I forget the title of it. But he was playing some kind of ninja, and had all of the nomenclatures and I'm gonna fight you and all of this. But anyways, take it away once again. I don't think I'll be interjecting until the end. Let this run out.
Now, take it with a grain of salt, man. Let's see what's up with this. I just passed the visions. I told you guys about the Kung Fu form. Okay, so anyway, Chris Farley, American comedian. I'm a huge fan of the guy. He's dead. May have something to do with that. So anyway, Chris Farley in the dream had this really cool Japanese sword. Big one, too. He was angry and was challenging this other guy who wasn't all that impressive, but he had this dark, dark energy. And Chris had a much brighter energy. And just imagine Chris Farley at his best, and anyway, it doesn't matter. So anyway, Chris gets his sword taken away from him. And because he's challenging this dark, menacing character, but he's menacing, but he doesn't look all that formidable. He's hard to even see. And so anyway, Chris gets his sword taken away from him, and then the dark figure stabs Chris in the liver. Now, Chris could just as easily be me. But it's at the top of the liver, just nicking the liver. But the sword stabs into the wall behind Chris, and then Chris slowly falls to the ground, but the sword stuck into the wall, and so the sword cuts up maybe above Chris's heart and out his shoulder, but obviously directly through the lungs. Y'all have listened to the other podcasts. We know there's a grief problem. Grief is associated with the lungs. I could just as easily be Chris as anyone else in this dream, so because it's all about me, let's just go ahead and call me Chris. And in the dream, this is what makes it just painfully obvious. For Chris to have this duel that he just epically lost in was he had to breathe into a bag, like a paper bag, and then give it to the guy who was going to fight. And then, and the bag looks like a lung. Okay. It's painfully obvious of all of this, but Ari, I know you're going to have something to add. And so, or even if it's not painfully obvious, even if I'm completely off the mark, then go whatever direction that needs to be gone toward grammar. So anyway, at the end of the dream, Chris gets his soul sucked out of him, and then by someone else who gives it to the guy who took his life. And then, but somehow Chris actually kind of becomes that darker figure. It's like they both get to coexist. In fact, Chris may even have more control. That's the part that I'm beginning to understand. Probably something to do with me coming into, more of my yin nature or something like that. But there's also a repetitive thing, and it's kind of happening in dreams that I'm not going to give the details on because it's not important, but it's also happening in real time with just events. There's a problem with that east-west axis. There's no doubt in my mind. And it's person. And who is, you've in the east and the west. No, not east and west. North and south. My bad, everybody. North and south. In the north, you've got at the base, or the dark jinn, who I consider the lead, is Gemmery, and the other one who is the lighter genie would be Orbis in our little system, and then we've got on the other side Person, and then Solus. So Person, that's the reoccurring theme in my theory, or not really a theory, more like a guess. It's a theory because I've got a little bit to back it up. I need to continue doing the organ fusion so I can handle this grief problem, or nothing's going to move forward. And so that's what I'm doing, and it is moving along very well as far as I'm concerned. I need to sit down and write I need to write it because it is something that needs to be on paper. It needs to be read. People would love the goofiness behind it, how much fun I'm having with the organ fusion and the inner smile. I bet you Tara could benefit from that if that's giving her any trouble at all, or even if it's not giving her trouble. Anyone could benefit from where my imagination is taken off. But it's not just imagination. This is this is very well backed by energy that I can feel. Anyway, that's all we got. Dr. J out.
All right. Thanks, Dr. J. That was very illuminating. And yes, you are correct. I will probably take it in a different direction than you, but consider that this direction is complementary to yours because I completely agree with your take. Let's take it from the start. First, we have the drama with Chris Farley and the negative guy, the evil guy. This is basically the shadow, psychologically speaking. But it's more than the shadow. The shadow is your relationship with it. It has to do with your dark side, your yin side, but it also has to do with the vampires themselves that are possessing this yin side, because that's what they attack the most. They take your spirit through that, your yang side, so to speak. They infect your consciousness through that. And many have demonized this feminine side, this yin side, this receptive, denser side of us, and conflate it with the shadow, but it isn't. The shadow is your identity in terms of alienation and separation from your true nature. All of your experiences that have caused suffering define the shadow. You're either discovering yourself through the suffering or remediating the suffering, and that brings up positive qualities, or somehow understanding it, understanding alienation. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't even be individuals. If we didn't have any suffering whatsoever, nothing would define us from each other, because our preferences, well, it's not that suffering causes our preferences, it's that we define ourselves as separate beings from everything else when we're isolated, when we're surrounded by darkness. And then the contrast with our own inner light, our own truth, shines directly. And the shadow creates definitions. Now, the point is, the yin nature and the shadow are two different things, as I said. So the yin nature is sentient, it's living, it's you, it's other people, it's the whole field in between. It's what vibrates, what responds to the consciousness, the spirit aspect. But the shadow is where consciousness is lacking and where the yin aspect should be lacking. Because yin and the shadow are both dark, they kind of, one uses the other. So parasitic spirit, for example, alienated spirit that doesn't belong to us, but which we haven't integrated as our shadow, it should be inert, but it isn't. When it's not inert, when it's possessing the yin, then it's destructive. When everything is taken out of it, when we have a shadow, but we are not the shadow, then it's healthy and constructive. So the thing to do when you have this kind of shadow opponent is to make sure there's nothing in it. Essentially, it only acts either as a reflection of you or as something that's alienated that doesn't even belong to you and that needs to be cleansed out. The negativity, so to speak, the destructive energy. And it's not really energy, it's a pattern pushing the energy. And in that sense, we'll get to Person and the north south axis. Now, the north south axis is our definition of self. East west is the rotation of the planet. That's what it represents. So the east west is the motion. It has to do with events. It has to do how experience and time affect us. The north south axis, on the other hand, is our own axis, the planetary poles going through the equatorial center. So, because when you take the directions, you're essentially looking at the planetary field as a hemisphere. The equator is in the south, the pole is called north. You can be in the southern hemisphere, so the equator is still the south. It's just directionally north. But for convention, because most people live in the northern hemisphere, we consider the north as the pole, which is where the axis goes through. So the axis of your body and the axis of the planet are parallels. And so if you have a problem with the southern aspect, which is where Person is in this situation, and Person is the dark jinn. So you're right. You have the dark jinn and the bright jinn. You have the decan, where essentially, to recap, the jinn are situated around the zodiac circle. There's 72 of them. And the zodiac circle has 36 portions of 10 degrees each, which are called decans. From the Greek word deca means 10. And 5 degrees of these are day side, the day side of the decan, the yang side, and the other side is the yin side. So it's like a waveform where the crest of the wave going up is the bright side, and the crest of the wave going down, the bottom of the wave, is the dark side. And this darkness is not the shadow per se, it's the yin. And you want to cleanse this aspect that has to do with the southern direction. And the southern direction is kind of the equator of the planet where things are sunny. It also represents the zenith or the top position. When you look from up to bottom, midnight is the north and noonday is the south. So you also have a representation that goes because the directions have to do with the stations of the sun. When the stations are yearly, then these directions correspond to seasons. So the summer solstice is the south, the winter solstice is the north, the spring equinox is the east, and the fall equinox is the west. And similarly, sunrise, sunset, east west, and north south is midnight and noonday. So noonday is when everything is most apparent. In astrology, the noonday position called oh, it's called the zenith, but the MC it's called the 10th house. Basically, it's the midheaven. So it's the top part of heaven, so to speak. So it represents your career traditionally. It represents how other people view you from the broadest perspective. So it covers the greatest territory. So it's a general view. It's not your personality or your who you are in the world as yourself and in your private relationships. It's basically who you are as a historic figure with respect to the whole human collective. Now, most of us might think, well, I'm nobody. Well, we're all somebody in that sense. So if you have a lot of planets there and it's prominent in your chart, yeah, you might become a historic figure, obviously. But everybody has a form of expression that usually it's represented with a career or what you do. Who is this guy? Oh, he's a carpenter. Well, you're not a carpenter with your family and your friends, or even with your intimate self in your subconscious. You're a carpenter as, some generic person in humanity would understand you as a carpenter. It's what you do. Similarly, person is where you connect to the human collective. And because this is what we call level 3 work, which is collective level work, the south direction is very important. The ruler of the south and the whole southwest quadrant is Amaimon, which is considered to be the most prominent of all of the four rulers, which are called jinn emperors, according to some. Now, these rulers are personifications of the life force of that direction or the solar station itself. In any case, person is the strength or the power or the force that powers that direction. And this is what's compromised. So, person in your case is dark. And in your confrontation with this shadow, which has vampiric elements in it, so we're coming full circle here. The shadow has vampiric elements in it. And the jinn are telling you that, look, don't confuse your your alter ego, the part of you that essentially represents the dark side of you and stuff, with these vampires that are hiding in it and working through it and messing it up, because you're having an aggressive relationship with it, an aggressive relationship with yourself, not the vampires. That's a whole other story. See, the dream isn't telling you this because your subconscious has yet to really accept it. The jinn cannot convey stuff. They usually convey things we're just on the verge of accepting. If you're in complete denial about something, the jinn will not be able to cross that line to make it obvious to you. Now, this line is crossed through dreams, so which are still subconscious, but you have a conscious connection with them. You can interpret them. But I come in here because I'm a third perspective, another perspective, but also I have experience with this level. I've been through it, and I'm still going through it to some degrees. So, in this sense, person represents, well, the jinn itself is about the energy body. So it represents the force of the energy body, and this force of the energy body is vulnerable to vampiric attack. And it's vulnerable because of the way you were brought up, the making money, career, all of this, and being exposed to the world. But it's far deeper than that. It's the karma, you might say, of being exposed to the world that somehow got infected by all of these issues, where your natural primordial inner feminine and outer masculine were brought into a false conflict with each other. So Chris Farley is the bright side. He represents the bright side of the jinn, and Salos is the jinn that represents the bright side. Now, you say that the dark side leads, in a way it does, but at the same time, these are self-contained. So nothing leads anything really. What they do is that the bright side establishes the pattern. It's what you want to do, what you want to accomplish in terms of what the jinn offer. And the dark side represents the force that makes that happen. It supports the first side, actually. So the dark side supports the bright side, like you had said with your analogy of the musician. You have you hold the tempo, the rhythm, the accompaniment. Without that, the actual song is flat. It's worthless. So in this case, person is that, but it causes distortion in your charisma and in your ability to channel, sexual energy, life force, and all of this in a coherent manner in your relationship with the world, and especially to the human collective, because we do relate at these levels in terms of life force, in terms of our energy. This isn't like to sexualize or anything. This is basically our own biological force that, and our prana and our life force from the breath dynamic, that, and the life force of all the organs represented in the five organ theory in Taoism. So you're breathing into the bag, and that's your chi. And your grief essentially is the affliction of your chi. You're giving the bag to this person. So you've given your energy, basically your life force, your chi, to this dark side in order for this support to happen. And this isn't just occurring with the jinn, it's in life in general. However, and this is the part that's not conveyed, because it's infected, but it's up to you to close the circle. And possibly because the dreams haven't rounded out yet, because I have taken time off and we haven't continued with this kind of thing, there's a discontinuity. And I'm closing the circle right now, bringing it back to the first dreams of the vampires. And these vampires are in this dark aspect. The jinn are telling you, well, they're right here. You can localize them in the south direction. And even though the lungs are represented by the southeast in this system, by the eastern position, all the way to the south, as it moves into the through the south toward the west, then the liver comes in this system again. Because when you face east, look at it this way. The organs are situated in the body in such a way that your lungs are represent the forward position, your kidneys represent the backward position, the liver is to the right, and the spleen, which represents the earth element, to the left. So this isn't the Taoist method, which puts, but it's the method where the mental vitality is concerned. It isn't the classical Taoist symbolism where the earth is in the center and the fire is in the south and water is to the north. Here, this is a kind of Western motif version of it. It's a Western spin where the element of metal that conducts fire is forward and to the east when you face it, and west is water and related to the kidneys, and the liver, which represents wood, which is also the air element, is to the south, and to the north is the earth element. And in those respects, the sword just grazes your liver. So the issue isn't really with the south direction per se. It manifests in the south, but the root of the issue is in the previous direction. It's as you approach the peak from your own personal sunrise, from where your personality is being forged, from where your viewpoint in the world, where you face the future, where you face new events, where you step into situations with your best foot forward, so to speak. That's what's compromised, and it's indirect. There's somebody once said that well, in certain forms of psychophysical therapy, you may have a pain in your toe and it actually represents a problem in your kidneys or in your eyes or something like that, where you may think the problem is in one direction, but it's really in the other. So if you have a rage problem, and this is the emotion with the liver, yeah, there's a trauma going on there, but this is only the beginning. This trauma is where you're focused on because you don't want to get into the deeper trauma, which is grief. And so your lungs have a problem because the lungs are, it's not the air element. The lungs represent the metal element that grounds the life force into your biology. The lungs are, or rather, the metal element is a yin element. Now, people are probably getting confused here because we're getting a lot of concepts. Let's put it this way: your rage isn't the problem, your grief is the problem, and your rage is almost like covering it up. You have been traumatized in the so-called liver energy area, and person is the focus of the dysfunction, but the person is not the root of the dysfunction. The root of the dysfunction is actually elsewhere. And you will confront this again as we move through the Jin line. But right now, we're dealing with the four, the cross, just where that begins with the cardinal points. We're starting with the first 8 Jin or 4 Jin pairs. And then you work through the next decan and the next decan. But essentially, in this system, you work with 8 Jin at a time. 4 pairs of bright and dark Jin, or day side and nighttime, night side, which means yang and yin, or the conscious pattern or form, which is the yang side, and the force or energy behind it that supports it, which is the yin side. So Pursan, like I said, expresses the problem and is where you begin, but you need to go into the lung energies. And yes, you need to continue the fusion alchemy, but you also need to understand the fundamentals beyond it, which is essentially that you've given your life force over to vampires because you were thinking that you were giving it over to your yin side, but the vampires were already there. And you're feeding them that way, and the vampires have caused you a world of grief because when the lung energy or metal energy is functioning properly, you have the virtue of the lungs, which is courage and righteousness and idealistic conviction. This idealistic conviction has been compromised. Your courage in facing the deeper zones is kind of compromised, and you compensate with rage. So when you feel rage, you want to defend yourself because you feel completely flatlined where these lung issues are concerned. And I don't mean to psychoanalyze in a brutal manner here. This isn't really brutal. Your subliminal teacher here is more brutal than I am. But he wants to tell you that, look, you've been really hurt where the lungs are because you've given over your lung capacity to this shadow because you naively thought that the shadow was really yours, like a real shadow, or basically you confused the shadow with the yin. You've given it to the shadow, which is malevolent and malignant, because there's something in there, a consciousness, a hidden yang, you might say, is in there that is causing problems, and it's parasitic. And when that happens, essentially this shadow comes in and possesses you. So Chris Farley becomes one with the shadow, and he's almost in control, but I don't think so. This is where I'll disagree. Yeah, he seems to be in control. He's got it. He's got it all covered. But you don't want to deal with it because, of course, these vampires are giving you guilt trips. You seem like a bell. They're okay. Everything's fine. But it's not the way. If these were your enemies, then it would be great. You could actually cultivate the positive side, but you've given your life force in the sense that, oh, these people, whoever these people are who caused the problems, I need to heal them, I need to help, I need to be on good terms. But in reality, the parasites from your local vampires are chunting or shuffling off your energy to other ones at a more level 3 level, a collective level. There may be people, and there are people who know occultism, sorcerers you might call them, who absorb collective level energies, but at the individual level, the normies, the grunt, the foot soldiers, so to speak, or normal people, individuals, have to compromise their karma so they can feed these collective level individuals who may have tremendous power in the world or not. But they do feed at this level, or entities. These aren't jinn, they're not natural to the planet, they're parasites that may be mutated, they're infected. That's a whole other level of inner work here that we're doing. So, and it's probably going to create cognitive dissonance in listeners, maybe. The whole thing may seem completely confusing, too much information, but you can't help it. I mean, I got to blurt it out. I don't want to make this a 2 hour or an hour and a half long thing. It's already going that way, but it has to be blurted out. So at least it's out in the open. The point is that, Jay, you have now stopped giving your energy to the vampires, and you're being given a lesson or a teaching about what all of this is going on. Basically, and I sent you an email describing this long before I even heard this. So by the time you'll have read the email by the time you listen to this. And I'm saying that these parasites possess you. They possess you through your inner yin nature, through your receptive, denser, uh, vibrating nature, through the force field, you might say, and also through the subconscious. And they possess you, you become them, they become you, and eventually you get drained because of that through whatever avenue you might have. So the lungs are traumatized without you being some smoker or anything, and you may develop some kind of chronic disease through this. You won't because this issue is now coming forward. So, yeah, at least even without my interpretation, you've realized that you need to continue organ fusion because that is helping you. And the jinn are telling you that, well, all of this work is basic. We teach kids this stuff, or it's not some high level work, but it's absolutely necessary because look, you've been fighting this thing and you're not supposed to make friends with it. You are merged with it because it's infected. It's not that this shadowy figure is the evil itself, it's that it's infected with the malignancy. And that's something the dream hasn't shown you, either because you're not ready to face it at the time that the recording was made, or because it's something that it doesn't let it happen because you haven't gone deep enough yet, and you're going deep enough. That's why there's all of this emotional cleansing. Grief is actually cleaning out the lung aspect, which is, like I said, it actually has to do with the east southeast direction as far as this orientation goes. So maybe I should apologize to the listeners for this confusing analysis because I can't clarify it. This is off the cuff. And like Jay says, if he writes it down with the experience he has and with the experience he's going to have, it'll be a firsthand account that will probably help a lot of people. And I would encourage him to do so. Eventually, if we take this understanding to maybe a next level where it can become more public and more coherent, because these podcasts are just like, they're not meant to be teachings, really. You're being exposed to real time dealing with stuff at the occult level where it may overlap the psychological level, but make no mistake, this is esoteric. This is occult. This is mystical, magical, and especially shamanic. So that being said, I'm going to bid you adieu. And some time has passed since this recording was made because I had my own stuff to process, and now I'm able to come back. And these interpretations are made possible in this form because of this. This is heavy stuff. And there are blocks to even expressing it because these kind of issues, not only do people at large have cognitive dissonance when these sensitive areas are approached, there are influences that are not them per se as individual human beings, but affecting them that also, and they're parasitic in nature, and even worse, that don't want to be exposed. So they're going to throw static. And cognitive dissonance is one way to shut us down. That's why addressing cognitive dissonance is important, whether you believe in occultism or not. In any case, thanks for listening. And no way this could have been shorter. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. And hopefully by the next video or the next podcast, we'll have made some leaps and bounds to be able to clarify things a little bit. Because Jay is going to come up with his next batch of experiences. And I suspect that these will have some kind of clarifying effect, or the drama is going to continue as we work through it, and we'll see how and why it goes there. Again, thank you for listening. Magus out.